popping back in. So I am going to take roll to make sure we can hear you as we start back on this session. And Dr. Anderson? Not back yet. Ms. Cohen?
Sorry, here.
Hi. Ms. Corbett-Sanders? Mr. Frisch?
I'm here.
All right. Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
I'm here.
All right. Ms. McLaughlin?
Hi, everyone.
Ms. Marin? Ms. Omesh? Ms. Karski? Ms. Karski, are you there? Ms. Sizemore-Heiser?
I'm here.
All right. Ms. Tolan? All right. I think, well, we have quorum, so I will get started. I am working off of Miss Marin's her go back list, and Ms. Tolan I have first, so we will rather than wait for her, Miss Cohen, you are after that, so we can start back with you.
Hi. Sorry.
No worries.
A minute for the camera to warm up. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I had a couple of questions relating to sort of this year going forward, but also projecting for next year. One is, you know, now we are learning so much more about masks than we knew when we spent our first round. So I have asked previously and will ask again about the availability of buying the KN95s and using some of this COVID money for that, if somebody could answer that for our staff.
That would be a question for Dr. Boyd, but I'm not sure she is on here.
I don't believe she's on. She is having other meetings today, unfortunately, as part of her job responsibilities.
She's got her hand raised, actually.
Yes, 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 her hand.
Well, there you go. Dr. Boyd, I presume.
Yes, good afternoon. I've been jumping back and forth between virtual meetings. It gives us a little flexibility with the computer. So multitasking. Good afternoon. We are continuing to get some additional information from the health department regarding masks. As you shared, Ms. Cohen, there is additional information that's now being provided to us regarding masks and doubling up on masks and different types of masks. At the present time, we are in the process of starting the sizing for N95 for staff who will be supporting students who need nebulization treatments, but we haven't gotten any additional or new guidance regarding the administration of N95 masks for all staff, or a change recommendation that would be something that we should do or recommend for our staff. That's different from previous guidance, but we are looping back again due to updated information that's been coming out this past week, and we're going to continue to evolve those conversations. We'll make sure that we provide you with that update as the information becomes available.
Yeah, I think that would be huge. Just as a reminder, the KN95s don't have to be fitted, but they are an upgrade from the cloth masks. And I've been reading a lot about, in particular, this newest strain and how they may be more effective. So they are, again, in the range of not super expensive. If we can procure them en masse, I think that would be a really big deal, especially since this vaccine timeline is not going as we had hoped. The second would be asking about calendar changes. You know, I know we had a meeting yesterday that wasn't awesome, honestly, about the calendar going forward. And I'm afraid your staff may have taken some of the brunt of frustration. But I think this is kind of a general theme I'm hearing among my colleagues, which is really, really wanting more creativity and out the box thinking about how we use this money to make sure that our kids are in a good place. And so some of that may need to be after school. Some of that may need to be figuring out some more flexibility. And so I would like to see more than just the idea of 43,000 of our kids getting an extra 19 to 30 days in the summer. I'm really concerned that that is not, you know, what we need here. I know the governor's started talking about year-round schooling. Do we need to have conversations what that would cost us and how we move to that if that's a best practice?
Well, a couple of things, Ms. Cohen. Thank you for that. One, we certainly had that meeting yesterday, and we'll take feedback about whether there can be some other options for the board to look at. I do think it's important to distinguish between year-round learning opportunities and a year-round calendar. Not every student needs a year-round calendar, or not every student needs a year-round calendar. Many students will need year-round learning opportunities. So I think the question is, do we need to be out of the box? We do need to be out of the box. Do we need an out-of-the-box calendar to do out-of-the-box learning opportunities? And I think that's obviously the board ultimately decides the calendar. We can bring you a few additional ideas. And I will only just say one other thing. I was superintendent in a school system for 5 years, as you know, when I stepped away from Fairfax with the year-round school. I was on the leadership team here in Fairfax when we had year-round schools. We had 16 of them. Dr. Dale, during the Great Recession, had to look at the data to decide to keep them. 8 schools did better and outperformed the kids did their peers. 8 schools underperformed. So it was a mixed bag, and it was one of the cuts made 15 years ago. So I don't want to sell year-round schools as a silver bullet. It's more about what are the staff, and this is something just in the 30-minute break. I think one of the things we need to do for you as we move forward and talking about extended learning and the calendar, what is staff doing now with kids, and what will they do that looks and feels different this spring and summer and next fall? It's not same old, but how do we show that to the public? And the calendar is an easy way to show a big change, but I'm not sure that, you know, a calendar doing the same old in class isn't going to move the needle. And we need to do a better job of sharing that with you and the board, and we'll work on doing that in the weeks ahead and next week when we have our meeting on the calendar.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin.
I'm just pulling up my camera here. So I first want to begin making sure board members saw my email during the break that at the end of the discussion, I would like us to vote on setting up an additional work session before the February 18th budget vote. I think there's a lot of additional information we need from staff, and that we need to talk to each other about employee compensation. And we'll need to have that shared conversation with each other. Overall, Dr. Brabrand, what I really do hope we can gain from that follow-up work session is that you and your team can really look at, as you said, more of the ways that we use the ESSR funding to offset operational costs. So then we can direct the operational costs to employee compensation. And as you and I both know, as veterans of this budget work, it's even if it's just one-time funding, it's still bridging us to the following year when we build FY23 budget to enable finding those cost savings and efficiencies. To my colleagues, I'm concerned that we haven't even had time to talk about some of the proposals within the budget. Things like $500,000 for new staffing on employee bargaining. We've not even discussed what that actually looks like and why is that $500,000. We haven't talked about the $500,000 for our legal services and how is that going to finally bring down our outside legal costs. And if it's not, then is that something we have to do this year? We had a lot of really great feedback at the budget hearing last night from our social workers and other employees who were saying that there are some major needs for post-COVID that they're concerned isn't reflected in this budget. So I really hope people will support a follow-up work session. And Dr. Brabrand, again, if you can just, I know you've talked about a lot, but just comment again, if you and your team can really look creatively about ESSR funding with 84 million, how can we redirect operational costs back toward employee compensation?
So what I would say, thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. One thing I'd say, we could start to look at it. I don't know if we'll have the whole compensation strategy complete in the next 14 days. That's what I guess I would say. Could I start to look at some places in ESSER where we could move some operating dollars? Yeah, maybe we could look at that. But to get to the $40 to $50 million in staff compensation for MSA or a step, I don't think I can pull that off in 2 weeks. I mean, and we won't know the other state and local inputs to help us know. So we can certainly look at what are some things in ESSER that we could take out of operating and begin to look at that. If that's something the board wants to see, but I don't think we'd have a final plan for compensation in just 2 short weeks.
But we will have an update from the chairman of the board of supervisors and the chair of the budget meeting and discussing next Friday, February 5th, on where we are on the county's efforts to do any type of compensation. So
I can certainly, yeah, I can absolutely ask and see what else I hear. Again, I can ask, we may not, I can't tell you what the answer is. I can only relay what the answer is. And the answer could be, you'll see on the 23rd when I release my budget. I mean, I have asked, I asked over winter break, and the answer was there's not any compensation planned at this time. Maybe it's changed. I mean, again, I didn't talk to Mr. Hill this week about that topic. Another issue, vaccinations dominated our meeting. I'll bring it up again, but that's just kind of where we are right now. I do think there's some positive developments that Ms. Derenak Kofax referenced that may happen at the state. I think there is more and more momentum to turn the bonus into a salary. I really do. So, you know, that's kind of exciting, but I don't know that we're going to have additional finality either from the state or even the county government in 2 weeks. But I'll do my best and I'll bring you what we have.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Dr. Anderson, do you have your hand up as a go back or in response to any of this as the chair?
I wanted to just very quickly respond to what Ms. McLaughlin talked about as chair, if I may.
Yes.
And I just wanted to underscore the point that Dr. Brabrand just got to towards the tail end of his response. When we met with the chair and the county executive in January, the primary thrust of that conversation was return to school. There were some inquiries that were made of us, but at the tail end of that discussion, the 2 questions that I asked or put on the table for discussion were, one, what is going to be the plan for county employees? Because it's important that we match that. And secondly, what will be our response when we have surrounding jurisdictions providing compensation increases for their employees? And as Dr. Brabrand shared, there was no commitment. There was no information that was provided. It ended up not there was no information to move forward on, which is also another reason why I did not report it back to the board, because it was essentially a non-starter. It's just that we're still watching the numbers. We don't know yet. We don't even know what we're doing with our own employees. And that was what was happening at that time. I just wanted to confirm that piece of information for the group. So thank you for the time, Ms. Dana Koufax.
I have, Dr. Anderson, I do have one question related to that, because Ms. Marin referenced a Friday meeting. Will you be attending with her this Friday?
I can be. I think I learned about this during this meeting.
Okay, all right.
But I
all
can
right.
certainly make a point to be there. We can touch
Right.
base offline about the time.
Yeah, let's touch base about that. All right, thank you so much. Next, I have Ms. Sizemore Heiser.
Thank you. I'm having some issues with my internet, so I'm going to keep my camera off so I can hopefully hear better. First question I had is to follow up with Ms. Pekarsky, what Ms. Cohen was saying. I do think we need to be much more creative at looking at year-round schooling. Dr. Berry-Brand, I heard you talk about the data from Dr. Dale, but with all due respect, I think that was 15 years ago you mentioned. And so it may be worth looking at more recent data around year-round schooling and those pieces. And I'd love to know more about the data in terms of an apples-to-apples comparison. So I just think there's more work there to look at to see, again, to be creative. I would like to see ideas for all of our students, because I think all of our students are going to have some level of need. I would also like, when we're looking at identifying students for summer programming, to look at progress reports on IEPs as part of the data in addition to grade reports, because those, as we know, those goals are very important for our students with disabilities. I'd also like to have some budget ideas about staffing for next year, given the difference in enrollment, and especially for some of our CTE and arts classes. How do we hold them harmless from the realities of COVID and trying to recruit? I'd also like some ideas around college programming for our class of 2021, in particular Pulley and Davis and STEP programs who haven't had the job skills opportunities they may have had. Can we do some recovery work for them this summer, as well as perhaps some college and career readiness for our twice exceptional students with disabilities who have executive functioning needs for a class of 2021 and may not have next year to make up for some of the learning loss. So I think those are important pieces. As I mentioned before, the college retention rate is 41% for students who start college and graduate in 4 years. And I think we need to do right by some of our seniors with greater needs to make sure that we set them up for success for college. So I think that's an important piece as well. And finally, I just would like to sort of go back a little bit to talk about our plans for compensation and for re-looking at what we plan to spend our COVID funding on for PPE in light of new data and information we have. So I will stop there. If anyone wants to comment, I'd welcome some comment on some of my feedback.
Dr. Berry-Brand.
Yeah, thanks, Rachna. One of the things in that 12-page report, we did talk about IEP progress reports in there, and we just kind of, we didn't have time to dig into it, but those will be looked at as we identify student supports currently and moving forward. I think one thing, honestly, what I'd love, if the board feels that strongly about looking at a year-round calendar, I'd like direction. That is a massive, massive system decision. I'm more than willing to be creative if you feel that's where we need to go. But I would really want to hear from a lot of board members that that's the direction, to head. The state is talking about some dollars. It is more expensive to do year-round school. That's not in this budget. And once you start it, once you change everybody's schedule, I think you would want to commit to that for an X amount of time. Otherwise, when the money runs out, the calendar runs out. So I've spent some time on this. I'm more than willing to be out of the box, but I think we have to ask some additional questions if we want to really do a system-wide year-round school approach. And if the board would like that, then I'd like some direction. The staffing enrollment, listen, enrollment is one of the dynamics here, but we're very sensitive to the issue as we're registering kids to make sure that we're maintaining staffing as best we can in our fine arts, our practical arts, our CTE. we do not want to wipe away programs because of a 1-year dip in enrollment. And we're certainly going to be keeping an eye on that. And again, compensation, as I said, I do feel this is one, regardless of what the board's final action is, has conveyed to us that you want us to find a compensation solution. I'm committed to doing it. I'm just not prepared to say today that I can do that in 2 weeks. As you know, a lot of our focus right now, as much as we're doing budget, is our return to school timeline, which and the work involved in doing that and implementing it, which we'll be talking with you all about next week. I'm hopeful that a strong signal of support from this board over the timeline can free up some of my staff's time to do some of these other requests around the budget and visioning. We're trying to do a lot. Everybody is working, including you all, I know, around the clock, around the weekend. And we've just got to realize that that's one of the real dynamics right now that we're facing. We're still trying to finish return to school and get that timeline solidified and implemented, as well as starting to do all this preparation again for the summer and for next year, as we should be doing as well.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. Ms. Tolan, I'm going to go back to you. Are your technical difficulties resolved?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Little problem booting up. I just, in the interest of time, I have a couple of quick questions, things I want to mention that I will put in as budget questions. But I definitely do support and have appreciated all the conversation around salaries for our educators, and we'll look forward to more information on that. Very interested in, potentially hearing more about the online campus and how we can utilize that expertise and perhaps expand that, and as available to students as we possibly can for taking courses, this summer, and possibly even taking, courses ahead of time for next year to even kind of alleviate the course load that students may have, during the school year next year as we dig out of some of our learning losses, et cetera. Also, we'll put in a question I'm looking to see, I don't see anything in here to kind of help out our families, our working families, as they adjust to new bell schedules and, different times as we move kids into school. Even something as simple as, providing transportation from SRS sites to base schools. So I will put in a request for information on that to help out our families. Also, I would love to hear a little bit more about, we do have in the budget the $2.8 million for 10 psychologists, 10 counselors, and school health nurses. And I know, we'd heard a lot from the social workers last night. I know also our system of support advisors are key in our schools as well, in dealing with students around some of these same issues. And so interested in maybe hearing a little bit more about how we decided on the 10 psychologists, 10 counselors, et cetera. And happy to hear more on that now at another time. Thank you.
Ms. Tolan, one nugget on that is those counselors and social worker positions, we did that in this year's budget, but we did it right after we adopted. We had that interim between we adopted the budget and then we had the initial stimulus money. And now those are not new spending. We are just confirming that that's where we're going to continue to put our money around those positions. And I think by putting it in the budget, it's elevated conversation. Do we need more of these people? And I think that's part of the feedback you heard last night, and we can certainly look at as we look at our staffing needs. And we'll know a lot more, as I said, in just a few weeks about the social emotional needs of our kids. So that's one of those two where I think we'll have a little bit of time, not a lot, but a little bit of time to assess how big that impact is, and does the staff we have, is it enough to carry the social emotional weight that kids are going to have with them when they return in person.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Miss Omesh.
Thanks. And I just wanted to comment, perhaps saying the least politically popular comment of the day today, but in talking about this compensation piece, folks, I'm addressing colleagues here again, but I really want us to understand what we're talking about. We're 1% COLA, or just 1%, which is not even what's being asked for. We're talking in the tens of millions. I mean, 25 million minimum. We're talking 53 million to give what's being requested. Again, I bring back the question from the beginning: are we in a financial crisis or are we not? We need to be making decisions accordingly. And when I'm seeing we're not providing tutoring at this point in a way that's going to meaningfully change the ridiculous number of D's and F's we saw. We're not providing, our mental health staff have already been significantly below best practice ratios. And we're now in a crisis, understanding the mental health situation. We're not going to get ourselves to a point where we're even close to where we should be to meet student needs. And we're sitting here talking about raises. I'm wondering if there's a way maybe where we can say, we don't want to freeze the step, in the sense that once we're at a point where we're not in the crisis we're in, that the step will be restored. So teachers will be paid what they would have been paid, not necessarily retroactively, but at the level at which, they would have been had they been given the raise this year. So that at least we're fair in what we promised, contractually. But to see, just looking at what's being requested right now, the entire budget we're looking at is less than what we're thinking we want to add for raises. It just doesn't seem to make sense. And the other piece is, from an equity perspective, even for staff. Actually, this is a question for HR, folks who can chime in here. Who is on a step standard? So who are we excluding in that case? It's not all our staff. And the most essential workers, I don't think, are covered by this. So if staff can please answer that question.
Marty, I don't think Sean's here. Do you want to answer that question about the STEP versus the MSA, or Lee? But Marty, are you here?
Yes, I'm here, and let me turn my camera on. I apologize. Oops. I'm getting ready to switch over to another meeting. So with the STEP issue, we know that we have employees who are currently at the top of the scale who would not receive increases based on a STEP increase. But with a market scale adjustment, it raises the scale for everyone. So in the past, as the board has worked to increase our share of the market, we provided increases, we changed the scale, we moved everyone up on the scale. The reason why other divisions were able to catch up with us is because they were giving market scale adjustments, which in a sense raised them with respect to the rest of the market. If we, as we compare our scales to other scales, if we simply give a step increase, we're doing what is expected, but it doesn't move us up in the market, and we will lose those gains that we've made by changing our scales. So it's important for us to think about a market scale adjustments, which gives increases to everyone, and it will also help us better position ourselves in the greater market.
Ms. Omesh, one other thing here that I think you asked a great question. I don't think I'm the one to answer it. Is there a funding crisis? That's a question to ask the county. That's a question to ask the state. The state held back a bunch of money. Now they're thinking, they reforecast the revenues months ago when COVID hit. Now, as the revenues are looking better, they're thinking they may be able to have more. How much more? That's what we want to know. If it's a lot more, we can do more. If there's more than 0.5% revenue growth from the county, we can do more. But we don't have answers to that yet. So that's one of the things I've never liked about the school process for budgeting. Schools have to go out first, but I don't have the variables yet in terms of revenue to do the budget. And every school board in Virginia is stuck in this because it doesn't have fiscal authority. It's waiting on the funder, but the funder hasn't released their budget. If I could read it, you want to talk about redesign with equity, we ought to be either able to have our own fiscal ability, which some states give school boards, or the budget process comes afterward where we're lobbying the funder for our needs, and then we're able to have the final word on what the budget is based on knowing our revenue. But we're trying to build something without all the final pieces. And I think the economy is not as good as it was pre-COVID, but it's better than what people have estimated it previously. That's my response to you on that. And so now it's trying to create a budget right now that maybe is a bit conservative, Ms. Omesh. It is a modest budget, and I said as much when I presented it. There are things on there that are unmet. ESSER's going to help us with student learning. We're going to have to get out of the box creative to look at compensation and go back through our budget and relook at our assumptions, our programs. And we're doing that with you guys right now. I just don't have it all done and wrapped in a bow at this point in time. And I know that's a frustration perhaps, and I appreciate the feedback.
Can this then be the year, colleagues, where we present a needs-based budget? Because our needs are clearly far more than the amount we have. Is that possible, Dr. Braybrand? Yeah, sorry, I know my time.
Your time's up.
What I'd say is that's what Ms. Marin was talking about earlier this afternoon in having a conversation with colleagues and not with the administration. The board, you all have your own opinion about the values that this budget represents and what it doesn't. And so, we're going to work with you on that and look forward to continuing to partnering with you.
Thank you. Ms. Corbett-Sanders, I see you have your hand up. I want, first of all, to ask to ensure you've had a second go back. Does anybody else need to speak who's not had a second go back? I've completed Ms. Marin's list and she had given it to me. All right. Ms. Corbett-Sanders, I will entertain a 1 minute go back by you.
Thank you. Two things. One, if we are talking about year-round school, we cannot make that decision without significant public engagement. So I would just urge my colleagues and Dr. Braybrand that is not something we can make a decision today on or in the short term. Secondly, to address Ms. Omesh's comment, is it time for a needs-based budget? It's actually our obligation to put forth a needs-based budget. And so I would encourage for our board members, my colleagues, to really think through what's not in this budget, either covered by the initial ask or the ESSA, and how do we make budget amendments prior to adopting it in February.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Ms. McLaughlin, I am going to put your ask up for an up or down vote. If you have any other questions you need to ask other than that at this time.
I guess I'd like a 1 minute, like my colleague, Ms. Corbett.
All right, go ahead. 1 minute.
Yeah, I was just trying to pull up my video. So, Dr. Braybrand, I have a concern, again, with what we're discussing here about a needs-based budget. So at a minimum, shouldn't the board be having some clarity on what the cost would be for half a step, half of a MRA or a COLA, and whether or not then we can put that into the budget for our conversation?
Yeah, great question. I can get you a sheet and we might be able to get it to you in the next day or so that has all those costs of steps or bonuses at different layers. So you can, in a sense, have a menu of the costs for those different things. But let me let Ms. Burden speak to that a bit more. I think that's something we could absolutely do.
Yeah, step increases are a little over 2% on average, and the cost of that is $53 million. Each 1% that might want to be considered for a COLA or MSA is 25 million. So 2% is 50 million, et cetera. the bonus cost of 1% is about 20 million. It's a little bit less because bonuses, of course, aren't subject to VRS rates and other salary sensitive employee benefits. But we can put that in a chart and send that out. Actually, I think Ms. McLaughlin, you asked that as a budget question, and we're providing that information.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just still think that if we're talking about the state would give us matching funds, that would take care of a portion of our employees. Yes, we have to match with it, but then what would be the additional cost to create some equity for other employees that aren't impacted or receiving that benefit from the state funds? I feel like there's a lot that needs to still be discussed here. And I do hope that we will give you guys a
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Ms. Cohen, would you like a 1 minute go back?
I would so appreciate it.
Point of order. Am I recognized?
I'm happy to pause if Ms. Marin needs to speak.
Well, I need to be recognized, please.
Ms. Marin, go ahead.
I just would like to say we worked really hard to keep on track. We're running. This is an issue of time equity. I'm trying to balance other things at home right now, and more. We're indulging people by giving more and more go backs. We did a round of go backs as I laid out email to everyone yesterday. This was the process. If anyone had a problem with it, that should have been brought before the meeting. I urge us to keep to our agenda, please.
Ms. Marin, I appreciate that. I am managing this portion, so I indulged my colleagues in 1 minute go backs, and I did express concern to you about getting all the go backs done in time. So I will allow Ms. Cohen, if you don't mind, and then we should take our up and down vote.
I just wanted to ask Ms. Burden, she just mentioned that bonuses are looked differently with VRS. I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear in terms of what a step increase does for you towards your retirement and a salary increase would do in terms of your retirement. Does the bonus still wind up impacting your overall retirement amount, or is that excluded when we're talking about that?
It's excluded. It's not, a bonus is not a salary increase. So it's not considered compensable income as far as VRS goes, so that we do not pay the normal VRS rate and ERFC rates on bonus dollars. If it's a step increase, that's movement on the schedule. It does not change the salary scale, and that is a salary increase, and VRS payments are made accordingly, as well as a COLA or MSA, which is usually a percentage that's applied to the scale, and so that too, VRS rates are paid on that, ARFC, FCERS, whatever is appropriate for that individual. And Mr. Smith is absolutely right that, again, steps are movement on the scale, so they don't improve your salary schedules. MSA and COLAs are the two items that improve your salary schedule. And the salary schedules are how we compare to other divisions.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that clarification.
Thank you. Colleagues, before we end this work session, there was advocacy by one of our colleagues, Ms. McLaughlin, that we, and I guess this would be to direct the chair. I'm going to say these words as I understand them, Ms. McLaughlin, and just please correct me if I'm wrong, and that it will just be a yes or no vote. To direct the chair to find additional time for a budget work session between now and February 18th. Was that your advocacy?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Colleagues, I don't want to expend a lot of time debating this, and since it's not a motion, I think we can just take the liberty of doing an up or down vote on this. So I will ask all those in favor of directing the chair to add a budget work session between now and February 18th. Please raise your hands in support of adding an additional budget work session.
I have a point of information, Ms. Sternat-Kofax.
Well, you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, the specific purpose of the work session. I think that's important. I have
Ms.
something in
McLaughlin.
mind, which I wanted to ask, but.
Ms. Kovacs, if you want me to answer that.
Yes, please answer your intent.
Yeah. Ms. Amish, as I said, it's not simply about employee compensation. We've been rushed through this conversation. I don't think we have done our full due diligence on a $3.1 billion budget and the request of the Board of Supervisors. We need an additional work session. It's really that simple. Thanks.
No. I mean, if I may, to further clarify, I entirely agree. I'm wondering that the specific ask we're going to have of staff. I mean, you know, one example is I want to see a needs-based budget, but I wouldn't want it to be an untargeted or just not focused conversation, you know, like today, just all over, and then we don't end up with anything. So if we have a specific reason, I would support this, but I worry that we're going to end up in just another one of these.
Well, Ms. Amish, I again think that the chair and vice chair can work with the chair and vice chair of the board to put some structure into it. But the bottom line is if people feel ready to come together with amendments and vote on February 18th after today's discussion, I leave it to them. I don't feel that we've done our due diligence and discussion. And I think we can have it targeted based on the themes from today, but we really need it. It's that simple for me.
Ms. Sternat-Kofax,
Yes,
in that
Ms.
case,
Amish.
I would like to present an amendment to this motion. I know everyone's going to get upset with me for this, but to specifically identify the needs-based budget.
There's no motion. There is no motion. It's just, should we have another work session?
Yeah, that's the motion, right? To schedule a work session.
It's not officially a motion. It was just a vote. But we're talking, because if there's a motion, there needs to be a second and discussion. I was trying to avoid that.
Right, and I
Just
object to
have
that. That's
Point
why
of
I'm here.
order. Point of order. Ms. Sternat-Kofax, I believe you're just asking for a consensus from the board, and that's why there's not a motion, correct?
Correct. Yes, ma'am. That's what I had.
Thank you.
If all of us can make
So,
rules,
Mr. Amish,
but all right, thank you.
It's not a new rule, but it's because she wasn't presented as a motion. It's just an up or down vote. So Ms. McLaughlin stated her objective. And so I will again, just ask if anybody wants to add their names to this to have an additional work session between now and February 18th. The theme of which would be decided by the board chair, the vice chair, and working with the chair and vice chair of the board. All those in favor? I have Ms. Corbett Sanders, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. McLaughlin, myself, and Ms. Tolan. All those opposing? Ms. Marin, Mr. Frisch, Dr. Anderson, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Cohen. All right, that's 5. That's 5. There were 4. So there were 4 in support, 5 against, and all those abstaining.
Yes.
So I have that for the record.
Clarification, Ms. Sternat-Kofax. This is Ms. Seisman-Heiser. There was 5 in support, I
Just a
believe.
second. Who was the 5th?
Ms. Tolan?
Oh, Ms. Tolan it was 5-5. All right, 5-5. And who is abstaining? Ms. Pekarsky and Ms. Sizemore-Heiser. So 5-5, and with 2 abstentions, that fails. All right, this work session is adjourned at this time. And if people would like a 5-minute break, or would you like to go straight into it, Mr. Frisch? Your pleasure.
We'll give people